This is ABC Fora.
What I started doing, really, and this sounds weird because these artists are not mentioned at all in this book, but in the course of working on my last book, The Culture Club, I was reading a lot about the Surrealists and particularly Andre Breton, the leader of the Surrealist movement, and I developed a little bit of a mind crush on him. I got a little bit obsessed with Andre Breton, and he had this thing, this sort of philosophy of art, about putting things next to each other to find magical relationships. He had a cabinet in his house, like a lot of people in the 19th century and early 20th century did, of objects, weird little things that he collected or that people had given him over the years. And he said that he used to like sitting, and looking at this cabinet and watching what he called the demon of analogy roam across them, and there's actually, like in a museum in Paris, you can see his cabinet kind of recreated, with all its stuff in it. And it's great, because a lot of those things have nothing to do with each other. There's a painting that Salvador Dali gave him and an Aboriginal bark painting that he got, from someone, and a weird Peruvian carving and a little piece of rubbish he picked up off the street. All these things just sit next to each other. But of course, if they sit next to each other for long enough, they start to resemble each other. And this is not something that is foreign to us today either. Like, anybody who's ever made a mixtape or DJ'd at a party will know what that's like, when you start picking things more or less at random just because you like them, but you notice as you go on that they start to talk to each other, in this weird kind of way. So that's what I was doing. I was really just putting things together. I was keeping a notebook when I heard lyrics that I found interesting, or read poems or little quotes from books that I was reading, just started putting them all together and then combing back through them and noticing that they were talking to each other, that they all had something in common. And that's what started me trying to find, what those connections were, or what they meant, I suppose. And in some cases, I found that there were actual historical traditions. There are, like, I guess, in some ways there are two kinds of rock stars. There are the ones who are students of history, people like Bowie, who is just, nuts for culture and art and poetry and reading and philosophy and all that sort of stuff, and will quote those things in interviews and talk about them. So, he's kind of, someone like him is a dream from my perspective, because he's always dropping names and you go, oh, okay, right, so you did read that, But then there's other people who have never read philosophy, well, for all I know, who have never read philosophy in their life, or never read poetry, But in some ways that was even more interesting, was to find that, that across the centuries they were echoing, that Billy Corgan was echoing Byron or something like, or Mary Shelley or something like that. You think, why is that? Like, is it, I could spend years and years trying to figure out if they studied Mary Shelley or Byron in high school, or you could just say maybe there's something in what they do, in the attitude they take to their work and their audience, which is fundamentally similar. And in some ways that's even more interesting to me.
Do you think, though, that the artists know who they're echoing? Like,
no.
Do you think that sometimes it's just a fluke and that you're giving them a lot more credit than actually is due?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could say that. I think a lot of the time it is absolutely a coincidence. But I really respect coincidence. Like, I think it's I think it's important for the reason that I was saying before. I think that like I'll use the same example. When you look at Billy Corgan's lyrics in the song Disarm, and the thing that he expresses in that song, that's an incredibly powerful song, and it's written from a really, you could say a really childish sort of tantrum of a mood. Billy Corgan has talked about that song and said that it was written, it's a fantasy of cutting his parents' limbs off, and he wrote it because he was really angry at them for, in a nutshell, for bringing him into the world with a desire to be loved, and then making him unlovable, making him a freak. And so in his mind was full of, his heart was full of violence and hate, but he wasn't violent or hateful because he was a bad person, but because he, deep down he wanted to be loved. When, and if you read that and then you look at the story of Frankenstein, it's exactly the same thing. Frankenstein actually says that at the end when he's asked to justify his murders. He's done all these terrible things, he's killed all these people, but he actually says, I do this because I feel too much. I was brought into the world with a desire for love and then denied it by mean human beings at every turn. What do you expect? That was the kind of thing, I guess. I started to understand what was romantic about a writer like Billy Corgan through looking at books like Frankenstein.
Does researching these people and seeing how well into themselves they are make you like them more or less? Did you get to hate some of the people that you previously had loved their music?
No, I never did. Like I don't want to hang out with any of them, like ever. I don't want to be.
Rivers?
No, I don't want to hang out with
Rivers Cuomo's the lead singer of Weezer, and a little bit of a man crush for Craig.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, I love his music, and I love thinking about it and reading about it. And I love reading about things that he did. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes I wonder if it has something to do with working at the radio station. You know, a lot of rock stars come into Triple J, and I've been working there for a while now, and you know, I think I pretty quickly got over the idea that I could be friends with my heroes. Like I you know, I just, a lot of the time I found I just didn't like them that much, or we just didn't have that much in common, you know. But in some ways that's made me like their art even more, because I realise what I like about it.
This is ABC Fora.